Welcome back to the Bro Show, back to the two-man edition you all know and love. I held it down last week, going 3-3 on the solo video. Not the best, not the worst. We're aiming to go full 6-0 this week, Chad. And your week off, anything really stand out to you in the world of football?
It was good to have a little week off. I was out of town, couldn't really make the schedules work, so I appreciate you picking up the slack there, Jake. It was really a perfect time for me to take the week off. I got crushed in NCAA, went 2-2 in NFL, so I think it's about time to turn the ship around and start providing some winners for these people.
Absolutely. And it starts off with the game of the week in college football. Georgia headed to Texas, a new potential big SEC rivalry now with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. Texas absolutely laid the wood down on Oklahoma last week. Very impressive win in a big rivalry spot. And it was really Texas's defense that kind of came up clutch. You know, when I was looking at research for, this video and for the slate of games, I was pretty shocked to realize that Texas is the #1 scoring defense in all of college football. They have not given up more than 13 points in a single game, averaging less than 7 points given up per game this year. And they have the #2 pass defense in all of college football. Now listen, I know they played Michigan, I know they played Oklahoma, who don't really have quarterbacks, but still, this is a very impressive pass defense, and Georgia is mainly a pass-only team. They're top 10 in the country in pass yards, and they're in the 90s when it comes to rush yards. So I think that Georgia's actually going to keep this a little bit more competitive than people think. That win against Clemson week 1 looks better and better as the season goes on. Clemson has truly turned into a very strong team. I think it's very likely that they will make the playoffs, if not get that bye for the ACC champions. But, last week they played a really bad Mississippi State team where they were like 30-point favorites. They only won by 10. Of course, they had that game against Alabama where they couldn't get the job done. I think that this is a little bit worse team than they have been in years past, and Texas definitely looks like the best team in the country. We know their skills on offense with Quinn Ewers slinging the rock around, and the defense is really what puts me over the top here. So the line has moved from 3.5 to 5. It seems like the general public is on Texas as well. Maybe that will scare me off by game time if it gets too high, but as of now, I'm riding Texas at home in this game of the week.
Sounds like you logged into my account and took all my notes off of my Google sheet here. I was going to say all the same stuff. I mean, the first half of this season, it really seems like Texas is the clear and away #1. There's some other teams that are kind of close behind. Oregon looked pretty good last week, seemed to be pretty strong. But I don't think Georgia's in the same tier. I'm along with you here. I think that Texas is really kind of the only real complete team at this point from what I've seen. But you mentioned it. They've got the second fewest passing yards. It's a huge passing heavy offense with Georgia, and they're kind of in a unique situation when you look at Quinn Ewers, who's the starter, and then right behind him is the fastest player in the NCAA, Arch Manning. Clocked in over 20 miles an hour on that 67-yard rush. That was pretty impressive. But I just think they're in a position really to finish the year strong, and I think it's really going to start here with Georgia. I really like what Sarkisian's done with this team, the direction they're headed. I mean, I hate it, but if you're a Texas fan, you have to be happy. You've waited a few years now, waited a couple of years with Sarkisian, and you're like, when's it going to hit? And Texas seems like they're back. So, like you said, I think that the difference here is going to be the disparity in the two defenses on this team. When Georgia barely escaped Kentucky, like you mentioned, one of the almost greatest comeback wins, maybe in history against Bama a couple weeks ago. They narrowly escaped Auburn, and then they beat Mississippi State, like you said, but just really didn't pound them like they really should have. So I'm gonna ride with you here. I like Texas.
Moving on to another SEC matchup. A team that's hoping that their coach is going to turn out to be like Sarkisian is LSU. Brian Kelly now in his second year there, and they had a nice ranked win at home against Ole Miss last week. I was on LSU last week. What are you taking in this matchup against your Arkansas Razorbacks?
Well, like I've mentioned before, I really have to pick my spot with Arkansas. It's the team I know the most about. It's the history I know the most about, especially histories against other teams. So this is the battle of the boot. This was our rivalry before they supplanted them with Missouri a few years back, which really isn't a rivalry. But the battle of the boot here, you've got 5-1 LSU, you've got 4-1 Hogs. Hogs coming off a bye week, which I think is a really big deal. Taylon Green went down with that knee injury a couple weeks ago against Tennessee. Pittman says he's trending in the right direction, which makes me think he's likely going to play. He's going to be okay to go. But the Hogs coming off that win against Tennessee was the biggest win in the program's history since 1999. It's the only top 5 team that we beat at home since 1999, and they're riding high. Meanwhile, you've got LSU, who just hopefully is just now waking up from that huge win in Oxford, which is an awesome game. We said it before the season started that was going to be an incredible game to watch, and it really was. But it's a perfect spot here, I think. LSU seemed to get somewhat of a slow start this season. They dropped that game to USC week 1. But when you look at the numbers, Nussmeier's he's thrown for over 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns this season. So they're no slouch that we thought they would be. They're really putting up a lot of yards, a lot of points. But Taylon Green himself, he's got over 1,500 yards in the air and 326 yards on the ground so far this year. He's really been an incredible asset that Bobby Petrino brought in. He's kind of brought him under his wing. And I think he's starting to really settle into his system. He's got Armstrong throwing the ball too, who's been incredible. You got Quindon Jackson, who's 4th in the SEC right now in rush yards. So for me, what it's going to come down to is how well the Arkansas defense has begun to play under Trent Williams' scheme. This Arkansas defense is really playing cohesive. They showed up against Tennessee and just really didn't allow them to do much until the second half. Kept them to 3 points in the first half, and they just looked fantastic. Kind of the story with Arkansas so far this season, before the Tennessee game, was really a disappointment, I think, in clock management by Pittman, team discipline, particularly penalties and turnovers. And we didn't turn the ball over against Tennessee. And if we can continue that trend against LSU, I think I like the money line, but I certainly like +3 at home.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think this is a classic letdown spot for LSU. They just had a very dramatic home overtime win against another ranked team. Usually in those type of spots, look at Washington against Michigan, right? They had that exact scenario. They beat Michigan at home, and when they do, they came out and got smoked the next week. So I think it's probably a little bit competitive of a game, but I do like Arkansas getting points at home. As you said, their defense has been really solid. They've gone against some really top offenses already this year. Even out of conference, they had to go against Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon. Now they've gone against Texas A&M, who's looking very, very good. That loss in retrospect doesn't really look too bad. And the win over Tennessee was absolutely huge. They also had a bye week last week, so they were able to get that kind of letdown spot out of their system, let all the players go out and party and celebrate the win, and have plenty of time to get locked in for this LSU game at home. I'm right there with you. I love Arkansas this week getting points at home.
Let's go Hogs.
Our last college football game of the day that we're going to preview, Colorado taking on Arizona from the Pac-12, now a Big 12 matchup. And honestly, looking at the Big 12 this year, it really feels like all these teams are really equal. I don't necessarily know that Arizona is better than Colorado to begin with, let alone the fact that they should be favored against a team that has a lot of stud players on their team like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. Keep in mind, Arizona is a primarily passing team. They really like to feature Teotiro McMillan. He's one of the best receivers in the country. Well, what's going to happen when he's got Travis Hunter lined up across from him on every single play? This is also a huge opportunity for Travis Hunter in the Heisman race, right? If he can shut down McMillan, that's going to bolster his defensive stats to go along with his offensive stats. And Zona's defense, in my opinion, nothing too special. I know Colorado's defense is not great, but if they can kind of lock up McMillan a little bit to an extent, I think Arizona's going to have a tough time scoring. They have not been all that good this year at scoring. Only 19 points last week at BYU in a loss, only 22 points the week before against Texas Tech in a loss. Only 23 points against Utah, 7 against Kansas State, 22 against Northern Arizona. Like, for the most part, we were expecting them to be a very high-powered offense this season, and it really hasn't come to fruition. Colorado can put up points against anybody with Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. They throw the hell out of the ball. He's like a 300-yard, 3-touchdown a game, every kind of guy. I love getting points here for Colorado, even on the road, where it should be a raucous fan environment going up against the Sanders clan, but I'm rocking Colorado +3 here. I think they got the firepower to keep up, and I think they could win this game outright, too.
I don't really have a strong lean here. I looked at this one on the board, and my initial response was maybe Arizona. So I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Probably not going to be a play for me because I have had zero luck betting with or against Colorado so far. So like you said, Arizona's 3-3, but they've played a pretty tough stretch these last 4 or 5 games with a top 10 win against Utah, or now top 10 win against Utah. Colorado's kind of beat up on a bunch of unranked teams. Dropped one last week to K-State. Both teams have lost to K-State. A little bit bigger loss for Arizona against them. But we can't match up those games and say that that's going to make Colorado the better pick here. I think that I know the injuries are priced in, But, last week Colorado was kind of crushed with injuries. Travis Hunter went out, our Heisman hopeful, like you mentioned. Biggest impact player maybe in all of college football. Love watching this kid play. When he went down, it sounds like he's going to play. But anytime there's an injury, you kind of have to question how close to 100% he's going to be, especially against or with a guy who's playing both sides of the ball. So I don't know how much that injury is. I still don't even know what the injury was, but it sounds like he's going to play, which is great. But then you also had Jimmy Horn Jr., who was injured. He's a big playmaker for that team. Once he went down, sophomore Marion Miller came in, recorded 8 catches, 145 yards, but then he left the game in a boot. So I think they had 3 or 4 different wide receivers who went out. And, it's kind of a testament to Colorado and their recruiting and their ability to kind of develop these kids. They've got some depth, and really the factor is probably Shadur Sanders, like you mentioned. I mean, he's throwing 300-400 yards a game. Doesn't matter who's out there. He's going to hit him. He's obviously an NFL first round pick. So that's a huge piece. But for me, still playing devil's advocate, I still like Noah Fafita. I still like McMillan. And this is going to be an awesome, like you said, matchup to watch. You've got likely a first-round quality wide receiver, and then obviously a first-round quality cornerback and or receiver with Travis Hunter. So I think it's going to be awesome to watch. I'm leaning Arizona, but it's probably going to stay away from me. Fafita's thrown 9 interceptions this year, but this kind of, to me, feels like it may be a bounce-back game at home against this much-improved Colorado squad.
Well, if you want to bet on Colorado, Arkansas, Texas, or any of these great college football matchups, go to brothrow.com/YouTube to sign up today for absolutely free. You get plus 100 on every single spread, over under bet, the best price anywhere on the market. Go to brothrow.com/YouTube today to sign up now. Of course, we also have NFL action over on BroThrow, and we have a great slate this weekend as well on the pro side of things. NFC North looking like the best division in all of football, with my Bears looking very good, Packers looking very solid, and these two teams, Lions and Vikings, both looking like some of the best teams in the NFL, both Super Bowl contenders. One of the biggest matchups of the week. Who you got here?
Well, I'm going to do a little recap first before I reveal the pick here. I think it's going to probably be a pretty polarizing game. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to pick both teams, but I'm going to take a look at the Lions first. They're coming off a massive, just embarrassing, terrible blowout of my Cowboys last week. Detroit on all accounts looked pretty awesome, but if you break down, this Dallas squad, they were without Micah Parsons, Eric Kendricks at middle linebacker, Kalen Carson at corner, DeMarcus Lawrence pass rushing, and Deron Bland's still out. He's on IR. And on top of that, the Dallas offense has no run game to speak of, and effectively have one weapon at the wideout position with CeeDee Lamb. So they're just running. They were running off of fumes last week. Didn't expect to win. Didn't expect it to be close. Almost didn't even watch the game, and it was exactly what we thought it would be. On top of that, the Lions lost Aiden Hutchinson, their Pro Bowl pass rusher, to one of the worst leg injuries I've seen since maybe Dak Prescott's leg turned into an L. He's a huge impact on this team. He's one of the best in the league, and I think a lot of people are going to look at that +2 line, even with that injury, and I think they're probably going to say, okay, the Lions have it all going on offense, and they're just going to hammer it. So I'm going to turn to the Vikings. They're coming off a much-needed bye week. I mean, in the NFL, any bye week is huge. You're letting all your players rest. You're allowing yourself to scheme. And I think that this is going to be a good spot for the Vikings. Their defense has allowed the fewest yards on the ground so far this season. And that's something that the Lions have really depended on with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, that 1-2 punch. They've just absolutely crushed teams with the run game, opens it up for Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Laporta. And, Jared Goff looks pretty good this year. He's been what you would call a system quarterback. So, yes, they've looked good, but I think the Vikings are going to neutralize that run game and force Jared Goff to beat them in the air. And when it comes down to it, I'm going to ride with Sam Darnold. I'm going to ride with this defense. I like the Vikings at home.
I actually agree with you on this one. I think the bye is huge. As you said, anytime in the NFL you're coming off a bye, teams have a historically really, really good record there. And as you mentioned, it's the defense, I think, for the Vikings that is getting not a lot of talk here. They brought in Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. I mean, this guy is a legitimate head coach. He's been a head coach in the NFL before. The only reason he got fired is due to, off the field issues. It wasn't because he was a bad coach per se. It was because he didn't get along or had, beef with the owner and the GM and all of that. So they really have a great coaching staff up in Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell is one of the better offensive minds in this league, and they have one of the better defensive minds in the league too. So I think they're definitely going to figure out ways to stop the run. Maybe not necessarily contain it. We know that Detroit loves to pound the rock, but I think it's going to be a very competitive game, and I like being at home, coming off the bye with a really solid defense. And they're given looks that most teams in the NFL haven't seen this year. Like, we're always seeing the Vikings getting crazy sacks, crazy interceptions off, unique coverages and combos. So the Lions play a little bit more old school football. As you said, they just want to run the ball down your throat, find the weapons, find guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Gibbs out in the flat, and then feed Monty up the middle. But if they're not able to kind of get that success in the run game of the middle, that kind of stifles everything else they want to do. So I do like the Vikings here. I'm agreeing with you. I will be riding Minnesota minus 2.5, as I believe they do stay undefeated. All right, moving on to the Sunday night game. Tampa hosting Baltimore. This should be a really fun game. We know that both these teams have prolific offenses. We've seen multiple games this year where they put up 40 plus points. I mean, Tampa put up 50 last week against the Saints. But I'm riding with Baltimore here. I just think that their run game is far too strong. Derrick Henry is looking like the best running back in the NFL. He's certainly the best running back in terms of like fantasy football, putting up the yards and the touchdowns. And I know the Bucs have a decent to solid defensive line, guy like Vita Vea in the middle plugging up the holes. But if you send too many guys up the middle, then Lamar's just going to beat you running on the outside. We got Zay Flowers. He can always put up big games. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. This offense, I think, is just too strong for the Bucs defense. Meanwhile, Mike Evans left last week's game with an injury. There's no guarantee he's going to be 100%. They really relied on feeding Chris Godwin, who's a slot receiver going over the middle. I don't think that's the best strategy against the Ravens. I think they got really solid middle linebackers and safeties with Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and other guys. And, Sean Tucker, their third string running back, had an incredible game. Rashad White may still be out for this game. I just don't think that the Bucs are going to have nearly the success on offense. So even though they're at home getting 3.5 points, the Ravens are just playing too good football. They're too well coached. And it's really the success of their running game right now. It seems like they're really tough to stop. I'm going to take a minus 3.5 in this primetime spot.
Yeah, so again, it's kind of a lean game. The number to me seems right on the number, so it's not one of those that really popped out to me. On one hand, I like the Ravens. Both teams are 4-2, sitting atop both of their divisions, respectively. Both have played great. Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson have played really elite football. Baker's got 17 touchdowns, 5 turnovers through 6 weeks. Lamar with 12 touchdowns, five turnovers through the same period. And they've looked really good. They're shining. They're at the top of everyone's fantasy football rankings. They've looked great. They have lots of weapons that they're able to feed. Like you mentioned, Derrick Henry, number 1 in rushing this season so far. And I only expect that to continue to grow. Meanwhile, you got Baker with all the weapons. You mentioned Mike Evans may be out this week, but if you look at his history, if he can play through it, he'll play through it. And he's just such a beast. Him and Chris Godwin, they've looked great. Chris Godwin had a monster game last week, so we know that he can backfill that when Mike goes down, and they can still score. So far this season, the Ravens seem to have had some holes in their secondary. They have one of the best rush defenses in the NFL, but the Bucs really haven't had to rely on the run that much. They've just really aired it out. They've scored a lot of points through the air, and they've moved the ball a lot that way. So it kind of neutralizes that, I think, that advantage from the Ravens defense. So just going back to the line here, playing devil's advocate, I think that +3 is kind of the magic number here. I think it's going to be a really close game. So if anything, I'm kind of leaning if that 3.5 stays. I'm kind of leaning Bucs, to be honest with you.
Well, maybe we'll have to take each other's action on BroThrow in this game. But let's move on to the last game we're going to talk about in this video. An AFC North matchup. Bengals headed to Cleveland. Some trade actions shaking up Cleveland this week. What do you see here in a hard-fought rivalry game?
Man, it's just bad getting worse for the Browns. Deshaun Watson not only has not looked like a $46 million quarterback, I don't even think he looks like a $4.6 million quarterback. He just lost his Pro Bowl number 1, target in Amari Cooper. Amari's headed to the Bills. Look out, AFC East. That's ridiculous. But the Browns have dropped 4 in a row against the Giants, the Raiders, Washington, and Philly. And really only one of those teams I would consider an offensive, stud, which is Washington, who's been a huge surprise this year. Now my new pick to win the NFC East. It's just they just look bad. They really haven't been able to get anything going. They haven't scored 20 points in any single game this season, and I don't expect that to improve. Now, that being said, the Bengals defense has left, they've left a lot out on the field. They've given up a lot of points, but this is not the team to all of a sudden, overcome this Bengals offense. Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, T. Higgins, they've all gotten Joe Burrow going. And, aside from week one, Joe Burrow's been fantastic. And I just think there's too many weapons on this offense. I just think it's going to be too much for the Browns to overcome. When you juxtapose those two offenses and the defenses, I think that the offense is going to be the heavier favorite when you kind of pair those. Obviously, the Browns have a better defense. They've been pretty okay, but they just can't score points. And I think that the Bengals are one of the best scoring or offenses in the NFL, and I just think that continues this week.
The game against the Giants this past week for the Bengals, I thought was a little bit, the final score didn't necessarily, reflect what actually happened in that game. The Giants, they missed that field goal at the end, but also the two touchdowns that the Bengals scored were that Chase Brown breakaway touchdown at the end and then a Joe Burrow 50-yard touchdown run in the first half. You can't really be relying on big runs from Joe Burrow to get it done. And the Giants defense, while solid, I definitely think Cleveland's is better. So if Cleveland's defense is able to kind of get that pass rush on the Bengals, similar to what the Giants got, I think it may be a little bit closer than we're giving credit to, and it might be good to have +6 in the pocket. But as you said, their offense has just been horrific. They are getting Nick Chubb back this week. I do believe I saw that he is confirmed to play. But, him coming off an injury, I don't necessarily know that we can say, oh, he's going to get, 25 carries, 100 yards or whatever. And without Amari Cooper, their pass game just seems horrible, right? They just have no real targets. Jerry Jeudy, the number one receiver. Tight ends, not, Njoku's solid, but Deshaun has not looked good. I think the offense is definitely going to struggle. I would probably lean with you on the Bengals in this one. That is going to do it, though, for this week in the Bro Show. If you want to take any of the picks we talked about, go to brothrow.com/YouTube to sign up. Get your bets in for college football, NFL football, MLB playoffs still going strong. NBA starts next week. It is the perfect time of year to start getting on BroThrow and get all of your action in for all the games. Chad, anything else you want to leave to our viewers before we end this one?
No, man, I think we've kind of brought this down to a little bit more of a more narrow view, so we can kind of take our favorite picks and hopefully start chipping away at those deficits that we've built up this season. So good luck, everybody. Sweep your slate.
Absolutely. Let's just win every bet this weekend. I think that's the best strategy here. But thank you guys for tuning in.
Simple game.
It's just so simple. Just win every bet you place.
Yeah.
Easy. It's so easy. But thank you guys all for tuning in, and we will see you all in the next one. Peace.